Now, real people, real opinions. Nighttime talk with Niall Boylan.
Ireland's classic hits radio.
Welcome along to our little rainy nighttime soiree. I hope it's not raining where you are, because it's raining where I am, and I have to say it is pissing out of the heavens. But at least, by the way, it's a little bit warmer, isn't it? That cold spell seems to have vanished. Maybe it was the hurricane or the other side of the hurricane that came to America and was coming over here. By the way, you might have been listening last night and Margaret told us that she was looking up at the stars and she took a photograph and she said there was a man on the stars wearing a pair of pants and a t-shirt with a square on it. And we all kind of laughed at poor Margaret, as we would and as you should, because the nearest star is 4.2 light years away. Anyway, the point is, Margaret sent us the photograph. There does look like... I don't believe I'm actually saying this. It does. AJ is nodding her head at me here thinking I'm mad. AJ, I can see the man. I can see a man with a square on his t-shirt. I actually can see the man with the square on his t-shirt. We're going to have to put it out to our listeners in some way. I don't know how we can do that. We did that. Maybe drop it out on social media or something. But I can see the man with the square in his t-shirt. Margaret, fair play to you. You're 100% right. There is a man with a square in his t-shirt on the star. Anyway, a bit later on, by the way, we'll be talking about an interesting dilemma from a listener who only got 10 grand out of his father's inheritance, where his sister got a lot more and the house, and he's pissed off. Now, he says the sister does have a better relationship because she lives nearer to her father, but he was going to contest the will, and his wife is kind of telling him, no, look, just leave it alone. You know, do you believe people have a right to contest a will? I mean, after all, a will is a final will and testimony of the person who died. That is their wishes. Do you believe you have a right to contest it? We'll be talking about that later on. Also, our interview later on was Anna Richards, and she is an ethical porn filmmaker. So you're like me. You're going, what does ethical porn mean? Yeah, well, I'll tell you all about that later on. There is such thing as ethical porn. And it's really quite interesting, to be honest with you, because pornography, of course, is huge. Sex is the biggest thing on the internet, and it sells. We'll also talk about gender quotas in politics. 30% has been there since 2012. And what happens is politicians or political parties, should I say, they get funding from the state every year to help them with their ongoing costs for elections, etc., etc. If they don't get the 30% female gender quota, they lose half their funding. Some have said it's fair, others say it's unfair. That basically you're getting women to run just for the sake of being women. And also then, the latest, of course, is Pascal Donoghue has said he's making grants available for women and minorities to run in the next local election 5 years' time. A lot of people are saying, hold on for a second, that's discrimination. That's kind of election interference, isn't it? You're funding some candidates but not others. We'll talk about that later on too. But first, I want to talk about assisted dying. And this week, the final report of the Joint Committee on Assisted Dying will be discussed in Dáil. Now, a lot of people get confused between the two. They're more or less the same, euthanasia, assisted dying. There's not much of a difference really, to be honest with you. But anyway, a report was published in March, recommended that the government introduce legislation allowing the practice, but not without a long list of conditions. Most of the 38 recommendations made in the report focused on ensuring safeguards are in place to prevent people from being coerced into ending their lives or making a decision to end their life without being fully capable of doing so. Archbishop Eamon Martin said such legislation should be strongly opposed and has urged people to contact their TDs and senators about the matter ahead of the next general election. Martin said that the society is defined by the extent to which we care for the most vulnerable persons, including those suffering from disability, terminal illness, or otherwise nearing the end of life. Now, according to reports, more than 1 in 20 deaths in the Netherlands is by euthanasia. In Canada, it was legalised almost a decade ago, and now they have one of the highest rates of euthanasia in the world, with 4.1% of deaths aided by doctors. Think of that. If I said to you what percentage of Canadians die from euthanasia, you'd probably tell me like 0.1, but that's 4.1%. 4 in every 100 people die because of euthanasia. That's 4 in every 100 people are choosing to die before their time. Is that a good thing in society? People opting out. We would be horrified at a figure of 4% of the population are dying from suicide. We'd be horrified by that figure. But yet we're okay with this, which is essentially the same thing. It's just a nice way of doing it. You know what I mean? I don't know. And now in Canada, of course, they're widening the scope for what they call MAID, which is their assisted suicide, that if you're, say, a drug addict, you can make a claim, you can get assisted suicide. If you're suffering from depression or mental illness or mental health problems, you can get assisted suicide. So, and there was also a suggestion, by the way, if you're suffering from poverty, that you can get assisted suicide. I want to ask you what your thoughts on assisted dying are. I mean, will you be doing, as the leader of the Catholic Church said, and opposing this matter and contacting your local representatives about this matter, particularly when they come up to your doorstep, if they do bother to come to your doorstep before the next general election? And will you be voting for it? So I want you to put yourself in a position. You're in the polling station, there's a referendum, and they're asking you to vote on assisted dying. Should Ireland legalise doctors assisting people to die before their time? You have a choice. You vote yes or you vote no. Which will you be doing? Yes or no? The conditions, work on them yourself in your own head. Let's say there's a time limit of you have 6 months to live. Initially, they would be the conditions. But we all remember, of course, with the abortion legislation, there were conditions there too, and they already want to change them. So don't worry too much about the conditions. It means that people who are terminally ill, people who don't want to live no more, can be assisted by a doctor to die before their time. That's essentially the crux of the matter, isn't it? Would you vote in favour of it? Some people would argue, look, it's your life. You can do what you want with it. Others will say no, because what we're doing is devaluing people in society. We're devaluing those terminally ill, those suffering from severe disability, or those who are nearing end of life. In the Netherlands, one teenager was depressed, and they allowed him to volunteer for assisted suicide, which he did. Shocking, isn't it? The number is 087 188 0008. Or maybe you think it's not so shocking. Let me go to Joe. Joe, hi, how are you?
Not too bad, Niall. Good evening. How are you doing? You're well.
Good, Joe. Assisted dying, Joe. Would you be voting for it or against it?
Well, I'd be voting against it, Niall, in the principle that if somebody, say, I'll just give an example. If somebody, right, had a terminal ill, say if they were brain damaged, right, as a result of a car accident or something, and they couldn't do anything for them, and it came to the situation, like, say, where if the person, right, that the doctors fortunately won't be able to save the person's life, that probably might be a different situation.
Well, that already exists, Joe, with the, do not resuscitate. You can have that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you can have that there, the do not resuscitate. DNR. Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of people choose what they call a DNR, which they'll put it down in their will or whatever it is, do not resuscitate. In other words, if you're in a coma, don't try and help me. Don't put me on a machine. Just let me die.
Yeah.
That's a kind of different thing. I'll give you an example, right? Your father, and I don't know whether he's with us or he's gone, but your father...
No, fortunately, he's dead just over 18 years. He'll be 19 years dead in February now.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry to hear that. But let's say he was...
No problem. No problem at all.
I'm trying to think of somebody that you might love. So he'd be lying there on his deathbed, and let's say he has cancer. And the doctors have given him a year to live, and he's lying there, and for whatever reason, he's incapable or immobile. But he's still still conscious. And he says to you, Joe, son, he said, there's 2 tablets over there on that table. He said, you wouldn't give me those 2 tablets in that glass of water. And you know that those 2 tablets in the glass of water are to kill him. Would you do it? Would you give him the 2 tablets in the glass of water?
Do you know something, Niall? I'd be very nervous about doing it, be honest. And I'm not being hesitant with you or anything like that, but I would give you an example. Sorry, no, and I don't. It's a very tricky. I know it's not a tough question, but I'd be very nervous.
Oh, it is a tough question.
No,
it's a tough question. It is a tough question.
It is tough, yeah. But I'd be very nervous in doing it because he would be my father, and to do that to him, I think I would have a very, very guilty conscience for the rest of my life in doing it,
Well, you're only assisting him. He'd do it himself. He'd drink the water and take the tablets himself, but you're just assisting him.
Yeah. If it was the situation, I suppose, as you said, that he wanted to be, if there was no way that he was going to be cured, as you pointed out, I suppose there probably would be no other option. But I would be very, very cautious of it now, because I think and I don't want to be going down a rabbit hole here now. We're legislating for a lot of things now at the moment, and we're going down a very dangerous path, I think, because what the problem could happen is if it was to get out of control, say if there was somebody who died of an assistant dying, and somebody deliberately tried to finish them off, or whatever.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Somebody coerced them into it, yeah.
Yeah. You see, it could get out of control. And I'd be afraid of that here in this country, Niall, because with the kind of laws that we've brought in over the years, none of them have ever worked. And I would be worried about that because, the health service in this country, the HSE, they're an absolute basket case. I wouldn't trust them to run a teddy bear's picnic. Now, mine run an assistant dying. But I would be, if it was a successful operation, or if it was in the situation that there was a need for it, if it was of their wish, I probably would say yes. But I would be very cautious because, I always think it's important that a person dies of dignity, that they don't die of something which the person like myself or whoever regrets to having it done. That's what I would be worried about. But if there was an election on it in the morning, I would vote no, and I'll be honest, I would. I wouldn't support it because I think it could, like the abortion referendum and all the other referendums over the years, I think it would just go pear-shaped. Really.
Yeah, they kind of move the goalposts afterwards.
Yeah, like you see it there now, Niall, at the moment with the government. They're bringing in the legislation about, get anyone who deliberately gets rid of any files for mother and baby.
That's right. Yeah. That's a good. That's a good law. I like that law.
Well, it's a good law. It is a good law, but unfortunately, the person. And look, I don't want to be going down the rabbit hole about a certain who. The problem in this country is the government will do this and they'll do that, but that there's an election coming and they're going to do anything now to get re-elected. And the sad thing about it is, I have no faith in the public about it. And
yeah, no, I get you. I understand the point you're making. Say there, Joe. Joe is a no at the moment. Morris, hi, how are you?
Niall, how are you doing?
Good. Morris, it is a very controversial piece of legislation and even a controversial idea that you allow people to do something that we're trying to deter people from doing when we talk about suicide on a regular basis. We try to tell people this is not the answer, but yet here we are bringing in legislation saying it is the answer. So, I mean, if you had to... Now, can I point out to people, because somebody's at the texting and said, no, there won't be a referendum. I know there won't be a referendum. Well, there should be, but there probably won't because we can legislate for this without a referendum. But would you agree with it?
I think, I was talking to one of your researchers there earlier on, and I think it should be brought in. I think it should be brought in and put to the people like repeal the 8th, my body, my choice. I told the researcher I was looking at an article in the paper that caught my eye, and it's that famous broadcaster in England, Esther Rantzen.
Oh, Esther Rantzen,
she's dying at the moment. Yeah, she's dying at 84 or something years of age. She's in stage 4 cancer, and she said she's having a horrible death. And she said, if it's the last thing I ever repeal, please write to your MPs and get assisted. Help me out of this world law. I wouldn't even call it suicide. It's your choice if you want to stay or if you want to go. Because suicide here a while ago was a crime. And people weren't buried in graveyards because it's consecrated ground and you've done the devil's work by taking your life. All the church shite that poison people. I think this referendum should be treated like the repeal the 8th. My body, my choice. And if you have somebody, I'll give you an example. I was in your company there earlier on this year and I got a phone call to say that a very close friend of mine passed away, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the day he passed away, it was like a switch. He's here, he's gone, on, off. And the day he passed, when I spoke to the rest of the family, was his younger brother's 3rd anniversary. And he passed through cancer and he had a terrible passing. So the only strength the family got of losing the guy I knew, Eddie, was that he went like a switch. Out, gone.
That's the way my father went. My father went in a heart attack and asleep in the middle of the night. Yeah.
The doctor said it to the brothers. He was dead before he hit the ground.
Mm.
And, that was they take great strength from that. Whereas the younger brother, unfortunately, my friend Eddie passed on his brother's 3rd anniversary, and he was eaten alive by cancer. And they said if he had had a choice, he would have liked to just go on his own terms. So here's another one for you. Earlier on this year or last year, a 102-year-old man in Australia was fed up with life and fed up with living. He flew to Switzerland and put the tube in his arms and went away.
Wow.
102. 102, Niall.
I know. I interviewed a woman that was 108 going back about 5 years ago. She was an Irish woman actually living in England. And she was the oldest Irish woman. She was 108 years of age. And I was talking to her. It was her birthday. And we interviewed her. And she was lovely. She was telling us all about World War I and all this kind of stuff. It was an amazing conversation to listen to.
Yeah.
Anyway, I said to her, well, look, I'll tell you what. We look forward to talking to you on your 109th birthday. And she said, no, God, I hope not. I said, why not?
There you go.
And she said, no. She said, I'm bored. She said, I wish I was just dead. And I went,
there you go.
God.
Yeah. So you can get fed up with life when you're that old. And I mean to say, for a man to fly from Australia, they should have took that into head and said, well, listen, there's something going wrong if we can't facilitate somebody that's lived in this country for 102 years and then he has to fly away.
I understand the 108-year-old woman because everybody she's ever known, all her relations, the people she loved, everybody, all her friends, her husband, everybody's dead years. She's been on her own.
Yeah,
you know
exactly.
What I mean?
And I know a woman that was 96 and all her siblings were dead. All her children died before her, you know. But getting back to you've had cases on your shows over the years where you spoke to husbands of people that went to court and wanted to end because the illness was getting worse and the government said, no, you can't do it, it's against the law, it's against the Constitution. Well, do you ever start listening to the people and let us do what we want? It's our body, our choice.
Yeah, but here's now. Let me give you the counter argument, and I understand, but I understand the point Joe was making too. When you look at it, like Canada introduced this, and now they're widening the scope of the criteria that you're allowed to get it, right, to drug addicts, people with depression. You know what I mean? I mean, taking your life is not the answer if you have depression. Talking to somebody, having therapy is the session.
Yeah.
Taking your life is not the answer if you're a drug addict. Going off the drugs is the answer. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, but they're so wrapped up in what's going on in their life. They don't see a future. They don't see a life. They don't but that's not what we should be. We should be supporting people who are having difficulty in life. Not telling them, here's 2 tablets, here's an easy way out now. See you, bye. Anybody that has a terminal illness that's not going to get better and is going to suffer should be given the choice.
But when you say it's not going to get better, I know people who have been told they've got 6 weeks to live. And I know one particular man, he was told he had 6 weeks to live. They had a party, a kind of fundraiser for him, all the rest. He had cancer through his body. 26 years later, the man was still alive. They got it wrong. Do you understand what I'm saying?
But when you have people like Esther Ransom coming out, now she's in the public eye.
I've read some of the stuff that she said, Morris, and I don't agree with her. You know, her attitude is quite selfish, don't get me wrong. I've read some of her stuff. I read it was in the Mail last week. She was talking about it to Keir Starmer.
She was in it today. It was. Listen. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. You know that. But if somebody's dying in front of you, I remember my mother telling me years ago, "Jesus, Frank had an awful death." Our younger brother. I said, "What happened, man?" She said, "Oh, the cancer ate him alive." That's a horrible thing because somebody's dying from the inside out, and you're sitting there looking at them wasting away, and you can do nothing for them. Oh, God suffered, we all should suffer. That's a load of shite. Let people cross over pain-free and not be suffering.
Is that a fair, Joe, is that a fair point?
Yeah, I would say so, yeah. I listened to what Morris says there. Morris, he does make some good points. But the thing I would be worried about is that, you know, and I said it to you before, I have no faith in anybody in this country who's in authority, because if they were to perform something, just say if it was brought in, and look, I understand what Morris is saying, and he's entitled to, that's the way he wants it, and that's fair enough, and I respect that. But if it was to be brought in, I would afraid that it could get out of control, you know, that they could change it and doing it to, say, a pretty healthy, say an elderly. Just say, for instance, like I suffer now from asthma, right? I'm just giving an example, right? And the asthma gets actually worse. They could have the power to actually turn off my life support, you know? I'm just saying.
Yeah, but not without your permission. That's murder.
Yeah. But I know that. I understand that. But what if I didn't give the permission and they could bring in a law and decide to get rid of me without my consent? That's what I would be worried about. Because
no, I know people think that's barmy, right? And just before I come to Marion and Mary, there was a case, I think it was Canada, and somebody will correct me if I'm getting the facts of this wrong, right?
No, you're right. I remember it.
Okay, so this is the woman who was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and
That's right.
she wrote that she wanted to die from euthanasia when it got to a point in her life where she couldn't be independent. And she gave her husband, wasn't it, I think, Morris, the power of attorney over her body,
That's
which
right,
means
yeah.
that she couldn't make any more choices. So it came to a time where she was not independent anymore. And the husband said to the doctors, look, I think it's time. You know, she wanted euthanasia. That was her final wish. So they went to her and they said, we're going to, you know, help you now to die. And she said, you're grand, I don't want to die. But the doctors turned around and said, well, you don't have any choice in the matter. You gave your husband power of attorney. You're now not of a sound mind. You're now not responsible for your own thoughts anymore. So we're going to do it anyway. And as far as I know, they did
And
it,
they
didn't
did.
they?
Yeah, yeah. They
So
went against her wishes.
they went
Said,
against
"No,
her,
we're in
even though,
charge of your life."
because she had given her husband the power of attorney over her. Okay, well, stay there for a second. Marion, hi, how are you? Thanks, Joe.
Cheers, guys.
I'm good, darling. How are you?
Good. Marion, you know, I have reservations about this. I really do, you know, and we're changing so much in this country so quickly. Is this the right thing to do?
Well, I'll be honest with you. Both Morris and Joe put forward very, very valid arguments, which is the fact that if this law is brought through, they can change it at their own will and desire. You know, and that bothers me. Now, what also bothered me was in your opening statement about a teenager in Denmark.
In the Netherlands, yeah. He was suffering from
Netherlands,
depression.
yeah.
I believe.
Yeah, I think that was wrong. It was wrong to allow that in that particular situation, personally speaking. I've faced with my mum died very suddenly on the 1st of March 2022, right?
I'm sorry to hear that.
Very suddenly. Now, the thing about it is that it was a good death for her, insofar as that she wasn't hanging on. She wasn't suffering. You know, there was nothing like that. It was a bad thing for us as a family because we never really got a chance to say goodbye, you know? And then I looked at it. My husband's mother died in 2014. And she'd been hanging around, but she wasn't herself at all. And I have to say now, she was a very proud woman, right? She would have, I know for a fact from speaking to her when she was alive, her wish would have been, just let me go. I have no wish to have somebody else wipe me arse, try and feed me, or do any of this, right? Now, what I look at is that I believe if a person is completely cognizant, right, they're of their right mind, that if they're asked, if they want to go, and like obviously a bit of counselling as well, just to ensure this is the case, then let them go. No.
But are we not? I mean,
limit.
Yeah, but Marion, here's the thing. We constantly talk about the suicide figures and how we'd like to reduce them, and you know, there's other options for people who are suffering, blah blah blah, and we constantly talk about deterring people from doing things like that. And here we are bringing in legislation that is essentially encouraging it. To me,
I don't think so. I don't think so, Niall. Honest to God, because like I believe those contemplating suicide. Now, I'm not a psychic or anything else. What they're doing is what they feel in the moment, or they felt in the last couple of days. Who's to say if they'd let it go over the next couple of days, their minds would have changed?
But that I could argue the same. I could argue the same about assisted dying, because you take the person I know that I told you had 6 weeks to live, but 26 years later they were still alive, right? The tumours had drastically reduced in size. The doctors were baffled by it, right? Anyway, the point is, in the middle of that 6 weeks, that particular man was really unwell, was close to death, and had been given the option, may have taken it. Do you understand what I'm saying? So doctors got it wrong.
I do, and he would have lost out on 26 years of life.
Yeah.
Which would have been very unfortunate. However, I think that if someone's of a healthy mind, healthy constitution, unfortunately, maybe they're riddled, who knows? I do believe that a lot of patients who are suffering from Alzheimer's and such, they would rather, be gone before they forget their families. Because they don't want their families to realise they've forgotten them, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, now when it comes to things like Alzheimer's, you would, based on the conditions and the criteria currently for assisted dying, you would have to make the decision before you're in the latter stages, obviously, because you have to be of sound mind. Well, but okay, so the point is, Marion, if it was put to referendum, you know, and it was specifically for people who had terminal illness and a certain criteria, you know, well, say 6 months, less than 6 months to live, etc., 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 would you vote yes to it?
I'll be honest with you, I don't think, and I think doctors would back me up on this, Niall, they can never, ever tell you that you've less than 6 months to live.
No, probably not.
And
Doctors
in fact,
just guess.
If I'm correct, they don't give any timeline because they're held accountable for that timeline, if you know what I mean.
I know. And I spoke to doctors before about this, and families will always ask, how long, doctor? And the doctor will usually have a somewhat of a guess, but they will clarify that that's only their opinion, and, you know, that it may not be the case. But stay there, Marion, because doctors do sometimes give a timeline. I want to go to Mary just before the break if I can. Mary, hi, how are you?
One sec now, Niall. I'll take you off loudspeaker because I'm listening to your pastor.
Oh, thank you.
Anyway, as I said to your researcher there, can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Yeah, as I was saying to her, that I think it's a personal choice. You know, if anyone is in pain, I've seen it myself now a few times. I think they should be, I know they're giving this pump and this and that, but if they want to go, let them go. Yeah, that would be my personal choice if it was me. Because of the pain, I've seen a lot of people in pain, even the same age as myself. And I'm going, this isn't normal. It's definitely not normal. You know what I mean?
Mm. Well,
and I think
50% of people will die. Well, when I say die in pain, they die in an elongated death.
From what I saw now, she was actually wasn't there, but she was in. See, the pump, at the end of the day, it's that morphine that kills them, as you know.
Yeah. But morphine, I mean, morphine currently in palliative care, to some degree, is assisted dying. Because we do overdose people with morphine to kill the pain. And unfortunately, the side effect of that is that it does shut the organs down. So, so it is. But when you're at a point where you're being overdosed with morphine, you probably don't have too long to go anyway, probably, if a couple of days. So in saying that, if you're at that point.
Yeah, because they're controlling the pain, but also killing them.
Yeah.
Now, it's not killing them, it's
not.
taking them out of the pain.
Yeah.
And you know them yourself, what's at the end of the road. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but the problem is, when you introduce assisted dying and you start moving the goalposts and you look at countries that have it, like Canada, for example, which is if you want to say, the shining example. There was a situation there, I saw a documentary, and there was this man, and he was disabled. And the council couldn't give him housing that would suit his disability. And somebody in the council suggested to him assisted dying. Like, I mean, where are we as a country, or where are Canada as a country, when rather than helping and supporting somebody with a disability, he was on oxygen and all sorts of things. I think he had COPD. And where are we as a country when you can't provide housing and supports for people with disabilities or with illnesses, and your only option is to say, listen, you're better off dead? Where are we then? And that's the way it will go. That's the way. But it's not. But it's not a whole different thing. That's it. That's the way we'll head. Because you can say to me, oh, sure, look, yeah, we'll agree with the legislation. We'll have loads of criteria and loads of rules around it. But they'll change. Because we see that with the abortion referendum. The abortion referendum said 12 weeks, 3-day waiting period, yada, yada, yada. And only 5 years down the road, they're looking to change it, to extend the waiting period, to decriminalise it, to get rid of the 3-day waiting period. So what I'm saying is, I don't care whether you agree or disagree with it. I'm just making a point that the goalposts change. The goalposts move all the time.
Yeah, but you're juggling with people's lives. You know what I'm saying? They're juggling it. You're juggling, like, my whole thing in this is, anyone that's in pain that I've seen out in Milford, I think they should, if they want, give them the right to die. Do you know what I mean? Say, okay, we'll do this, and talk among the family or whatever, but to see people in pain is just...
I know. It is horrible to see people in pain. Thank you, Marion. And Mary, if you want to wait there, Mary, I want to come to Martin and Mike straight after the break if I can, or not in that order, the other way around. Mike and Martin. Please save me, Mary. We'll take a quick break. The question I'm asking you is, the final report on the Joint Committee of Assisted Dying will be discussed in the Dáil before the breakup of the government for Christmas, or the breakup for dissolving the government with the election, by the way. Rumours are circulating tonight, by the way, just in case you didn't know. They're saying, where did I have it there a few minutes ago? Right, let me just see what they've said. These are from good sources, by the way. They're saying now the election will happen on the 29th or the 6th of December. 29th of November, the 6th of December. They've extended it by a couple of weeks, and the reason was there was a few bills to pass, including the hate speech bill, which we talked about today in the podcast, by the way. But there's a few bills to pass, so it does look like the election will happen before Christmas. And it will suit the government on a nice cold night. All right, somebody said, just had to write in about Niall making a very dangerous and factually incorrect statement. Morphine is not used to hasten death. It doesn't shut down organs. This is a common misconception. Well, that is, of course, if it's used properly, by the way. It's a common misconception that we as doctors have to correct. People in desperate need of pain relief are terrified to take it. He needs to retract that statement, as it couldn't be further from the truth. Okay. Very clearly, I was talking about people in palliative care, by the way. I wasn't talking people who, hurt their knee or something like that. We're talking about people in palliative care. And I can give you one example of many, many years ago. A friend of mine was in a very difficult situation with a very short time left to live. And he was in great pain. And a doctor said to me and another person, we can increase the morphine, which would reduce his pain, but it will shorten his life. That's what they said to me. I can only go by what a doctor said to me. So one of your colleagues told me something different. So I'm only assuming, and I can only make an assumption, that a very high dose of morphine certainly isn't good for the body, but certainly reduces pain. And I think that will be everybody's aim in that final stages of life. I'm not suggesting for a minute, by the way, that people shouldn't take morphine for pain. Of course they should take morphine for pain, as long as it's administered properly by a doctor who knows what they're doing. But when you say that it doesn't hasten death, I suppose it depends on the dose that's given, and the purpose and the reason for why it's being given and what type of dosage is being given. And I think, well, look, if anybody's a doctor, or if you yourself, interestingly enough, would like to come on, you're quite welcome to come on in relation to that and explain that in a bit more detail for us. But I can only go by what I'm reading online here as well during the break. I was just having a quick look. It says in some circles it can. Anyway, look. Let me see. Let me go to Mike. Mike, hi, how are you?
Hey, Brian, how's it going?
Yeah, I'm good, Mike. Mike, okay, let me get back to, assisted dying. It is a minefield, isn't it? Because as much as on one hand, I think people should have the choice to, check out, if they feel that there's no purpose anymore, or they feel that, their life is, they don't have long to live, or they might be in great pain, or have a terminal illness, or whatever it happens to be. On the other hand, I don't want to devalue life. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So, do you think it's a good idea?
Oh, gee, I agree 110% with it, Niall, because I had a serious operation my back in 07, and I went, I was on morphine patches now to kill the pain that. But before I went on the morphine patches, I went to this healer up in Mitchelstown, and I was coming into Mitchelstown, Niall, and there was a 40-foot trailer of sugar beet in front of me. And there was sweat pouring down the side of my face from peeing. And I said, will I or won't I?
Oh, God.
And I said I wouldn't, because my wife was just after having a child, and I couldn't do it to her.
No, certainly not.
Yeah, I couldn't do it. But I was that close to Niall.
I'm sorry to hear that. I'm very sorry to hear that.
But 1 second now, Niall. I went into a doctor. He saved my life. I won't say his name, but he's a God saver to me, and he reckons that the pain I was in, he said, if there was an earthquake in the morning, he said the pain you're in to be in a 9.9 Richter scale. So he gave me, that was of a Thursday evening. He mean for an MRI scan the following Monday, and he me before the neurosurgeon the Monday after, and he was going operating Wednesday, and that was the Wednesday of the blue flu.
Oh, I remember that, yeah. I remember the blue flu, yeah.
Yeah. Well, the Dr. O'Sullivan he would, and he done his operations on severity of pain. But I had to go into the chemist shop to get the morphine patches. Didn't I get a seizure going into the shop? And I'll never forget it as long as I live. But as I said, no, Niall, it twisted me straight in the face. But I was just, and they had to drill a hole into my spine, go underneath the spinal cord and put in, as the doctor said, I had to get the grinder in to cut the disc that was floating around inside my spinal canal.
Wow.
And he came around the following morning. I said, doctor, ring the wife. What's wrong? He said, what's wrong? I said, I have to go home. He said, the right operation you have. I said, Doctor, do you realize this is the first time in 11 months I'm not in pain? I said, but I know. And that was in Maybank holiday weekend, 07. I was supposed to go back driving the end of November and go back to work the end of December, early January.
Yeah.
But thanks for the guide, and thanks for the guide. It worked out 100% for me, like. So I know all about the morphine then as well, like that. And the doctor warned me. He said, Mike, he said, you can't do nothing. He said, you think you can, you can't do nothing. And you see, I was paying for the morphine patches and all that. Like, I had no.
No, look, I want to agree with the person sending the statement in relation to morphine, generally speaking. People shouldn't be afraid to use morphine. Morphine is great for pain relief. There's no doubt about that.
Without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah, once it's administered by and regulated by a doctor or somebody who knows what they're doing. Absolutely.
To the patches I had, to the morphine patches. But and it was of a Thursday evening, I changed the morphine patch. And at 6 o'clock, I had no pain. 6:30, I had no pain. I'll tell you, at 5 seconds past 7, it hit me like you get a belt of a hammer in between the two eyes. But touch wood, thanks for the God, like the doctor, but no,
yeah,
that was my.
Okay, I'm sorry to hear you went through all of that, but would you vote for assisted dying if it came to a referendum?
I would.
You would. Okay.
I would, Niall, because, if a person, as one of our people were saying there before, like, if you've no quality of life, and can I say something now, Niall, I don't know if I'm talking out of place, like, it's still a taboo subject in this country about assisted, euthanasia, thing like that. Adolf Hitler was on about that back in the 30s. And it's still a taboo subject in this country today,
Well, it's taboo because some people believe that it devalues life. And I know dear Archbishop Eamon Martin said he strongly opposed it. And the reason he said was, by the extent to which we care for our most vulnerable persons in society, including those suffering from disability, terminal illness, to otherwise nearing the end of life, we're defined by that. And to some degree, even though I'm not a Christian, I do agree with Eamon Martin that we are defined about by how we deal with the most vulnerable in society. And the idea that we encourage people that there's an option, now I'm not talking about people who might only have 3 or 4 days to live and have a terminal illness. I'm talking about people like, if we look at Canada and what they're doing at the moment, saying to people, there's to a drug addict, you have an option, you can have assisted dying if you like, rather than give up the drugs. Just, you know what I mean? I just don't know if that's the right way to be dealing with society.
I know that, Niall, but is that kind of called tough love, like?
Wow.
That on the other side of it, like that like I feel like that we're becoming into. You go to the doctor now. You put on tablets for are we turning into junkies? Are we being turned into junkies? Would you go with a head cold, like you put on tablets, you put on medication, like for this and for that?
I do get what you're saying. Sorry, your phone line has just got a bit dodgy there, but I do get the point that you're making, Mike. But stay there for a second because I want to go to Martin as well. Martin, hi, how are you?
Yeah, hi, Niall. Good evening. Nice to talk to you again.
You too, Martin.
Just listening to Mike's story there. Well done, Michael. I mean, that's pretty adverse circumstances you went through, and it's great to see that you came out the other end. That's brilliant. My heart says, Niall, about the legislation. My heart says yes to the legislation, and my head says no to the legislation, I suppose. And I think it's subjective, Niall, to each individual. But we can't think collectively as a society in terms of vulnerable people. And you are right, we have a kind of a duty of care to vulnerable adults with intellectual disabilities or severe physical disabilities and so on, and frail elderly. And you mentioned capacity and people's ability to make their own decisions and so on. I think it's kind of outside the scope of a person unable to make their own decision, then that's it. You can't bring up the concept.
Yeah, but when you say a person making their own decision, here's the thing. So you're lying in bed, but you're corpus mentis, right? And
Yes.
and you're in great pain because maybe you've lung cancer or something like that, and you know you don't have long left, but you're still corpus mentis. You still understand what's going on around you. You know, apart from you might be a bit drowsy from painkillers and all sorts of stuff. I mean, should you be allowed to make a decision at that point in your life? Because a miracle could, when I say a miracle could happen, you know, you could, you know, come around, your cancer tumours might suddenly start reducing. It's unlikely. But I'm just saying, you know, you're making a decision based on the pressure you're under at that particular moment in time and pain.
I agree, and I think your mind, certainly, and your perception in that moment of real pain is very real, and it's so easy. I think just from a man's perspective, from my perspective, I am useless with pain. So my mood could change very, very quickly if I'm frail, elderly, or if I'm vulnerable and I'm stuck in my house and the world, there's nothing to see other than death. Get me out of this situation. So I think that the decision in terms of a vote for a referendum would be subjective to individuals. I don't think in this situation, unlike the abortion referendum, where you're thinking, well, first of all, I'm a man, I'm not a woman, and I believe in the right of the unborn child, for example. So I know I'm contradictory probably when I say this, but I would believe firmly in the right to make a choice about euthanasia. If it became a practice in Ireland, I think, Niall, I totally agree with your principle, though. It really would have. I mean, I know you say that these evolve, legislation evolves into other things. I totally disagree with the idea that somebody with depression should be even considered or even signposted towards euthanasia clinics.
Well, then I think what we got to do is look, we can have what they call an ordinary referendum or normal ordinary referendum. I think it's Article 27 of the Constitution. So even though this doesn't require constitutional amendment, I think maybe this would be a presidential decision. There should be a referendum on it, and it should be inserted into the Constitution with the criteria in it, so it can't be changed.
Yeah. So one of the things, now you mentioned that this legislation or this bill is going to be put forward for Christmas or something like that.
No. This week the final report of the Joint Committee Assisted Dying will be discussed at the Dáil. That doesn't mean it'll be passed. I imagine probably not in the lifetime of this government.
It needs wider consultation with public.
Well, they already have. They've already had a joint committee for the last nearly a year on it.
Yeah.
So, and they've also had a citizens' assembly on it too. So,
you see, I certainly do not want to speak for any human being who's suffering. That's the point. Because I tell you, I do know people who's passed away through hospice care, including my own family, and there is already a level, whether we like it or not, of when the body is dying. That's why we go to hospice care, for example. It's dying, and that's allowed. There's a medical decision made at that moment to say this person's body is not responding anymore to medications. The organs are shutting down, and that's kind of normal for somebody who's becoming very, very unwell to the point where it goes palliative. So doctors already make decisions to say we are no longer treating this patient medically because it's not doing anything. All we can do is offer pain relief, and that's what happens. So in a way, in some ways, in some capacity, there is a level of euthanasia without even consent, if that makes sense.
No, I understand the point you're making. Hang on, I've only got a minute left. I need to go to John as well before the break too.
Sure.
John, hi, how are you?
Just a quick one there. I was just thinking about, you were saying the depression, that, you know, people have depression, they can actually look for this as well.
Well, no, not here in the legislation or suggestion here. I'm just saying in Canada that has been suggested, and also there was one case in the Netherlands. But we were just saying, like, if the goalposts move, that could essentially happen.
Yeah, because I just think that could actually probably be a positive thing, because there might be people there who actually go and commit suicide, whereas if they thought, you know, they could ask somebody to help them, you can catch these people before.
Oh, I know what you mean. Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
No, I don't know. It's probably not relevant to the point.
No, it is relevant, and I get the point you're making there. So rather than just do something silently on their own, they might seek out help of a doctor to help them do it, and then the doctor can intervene. Yeah.
Well, Well, I'll give you another thing, Noel. We had a brother there a few years ago, and he was really, really sick, and he's actually been on your show sometime. But he's really, really sick, and he was just in a coma for, I'd say, about 7 weeks. And he was like, there was no response at all. He was still alive, he was, breathing. And now, if that was up to us then to decide whether we, to let him go, we probably would have said it'd only be fair to let him go. And he pulled out of it.
I made a full recovery.
And he's grand today.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, well, we already have DNRs, don't we? So people can sign do not resuscitates anyway if they want to. But that just goes to show you the way, sometimes I watched a documentary one night. I'm sorry I've run out of time, John. I do apologise to you and also to Martin. But I watched a documentary once about a guy that was in a road traffic accident and he was in a coma for nearly 2 years. And the family were very close, even though they had fought through the courts to keep him on a machine because they didn't have the money anymore. And they were very close to pulling the plug. And he came out of the coma after 2 years. And now, with obviously a lot of physiotherapy, because obviously his muscles had wasted away over 2 years lying in a bed. But now he's perfectly fine. 2 or 3 years later, he's perfectly fine. He's back at work. He's back doing what he does best or whatever it is. It just goes to show you, doctors differ. What's that old line? Doctors differ, patients die. Isn't that what they say?
Now, real people, real opinions. Nighttime Talk with Niall Boylan.
Ireland's Classic Hits Radio.